What's up, Eagles Nation? What's going on, NFL world? How you doing, division rivals? This is Steven Hyder with Gate City Sports Channel, the sports channel where the cerebral NFL fan comes for about 10 minutes of daily content. All right, guys, so we're on the eve of the game. Got a big matchup here at home with the Bears. And look, for the first time in a long time, Jim Schwartz is starting to get back some of the weapons he expected to have at the beginning of the year. And for me personally, I think this is a big game for Jim Schwartz because he's going to finally get to throw out the secondary he's probably wanted to have on the field this entire season. He's got Ronald Darby, he's got Avonte Maddox, and he's got Jalen Mills out there for himself. In addition to having those guys back, he's probably not too far along from getting Tim Jernigan back. So he'll have Jernigan put beside Fletcher Cox with the two young guys. Um, Nigel Bradham, who knows how far, he should be coming back pretty soon if he's not back this week. Like, the Eagles' health is improving. And that's what I kind of want to talk about today, guys. I really want to talk about the defense. And there were some weird things I kind of noticed about the Eagles' defense as I was digging into this topic. So to begin with, what I did notice is that we're actually carrying 27 active roster players on the defensive side of the football, which basically means we're stealing two away from the offense. So we only have 23 offensive players right now. When we talk about offense, we got to keep in mind if you're talking about 23, you got to minus out the three. You got three quarterbacks, so two of those quarterbacks aren't making a contribution, other than maybe communicating with Carson Wentz in his ear, maybe letting them know what they see on the defense. And you got what, three to maybe four offensive linemen? I don't know exactly. I didn't really count them up, guys. So you normally carry 8 to 9 offensive linemen. So how many of them are not really making a contribution? Obviously, you got your five, and you got people like Big V who will come in the game for blocking assignments and play a third tight end role. But outside of that, guys, I mean, your roster is your roster. And, when you really break it down, you got five receivers, two tight ends, right? You got your five receivers, you got your two tight ends, your four running backs, and Carson Wentz. That's it. So what's that give you? It's 7 to 11, 12 players that can make an impact. I mean, that's what's kind of scary to me about talking about this team is that we're going to have to probably really rely heavily upon this defense at times because you know you have certain players on this offense. I think Miles Sanders is a ball player. Okay, Jordan Howard is a ball player. Carson Wentz is a gamer. Deshaun Jackson's a gamer. Alshon Jeffrey's a gamer. Zach Ertz is a gamer. Dallas Goedert's got some skill. But then you get past those guys, man. I mean, Nelson Aguilar has potential. He's elusive. He can't track the ball. I mean, Mac Hollins, either he's not getting separation, although I've heard the opposite. I have seen film where he did get separation. So either he's not getting consistent separation from corners, or Carson Wentz has no trust in that guy. So it does get kind of concerning here. And I was a little shocked to break down the defensive numbers to see that we were carrying more than 25 defensive players. Now, some of this has to do with injuries, and I think as guys start coming back, maybe we go back down towards 25 men. But at least for the secondary purposes, guys, we got Darby, Maddox, and Mills to start. And then you got Rasul Douglas and kind of Craig James back there to play those backup roles. I don't know how much faith they have in Sidney Jones. I would probably guess there's not a whole lot of faith at this point in Sidney Jones, to be quite honest, guys. But look, the one thing I'll say about the secondary is that there's some concerns about contract. I mean, outside of Maddox, LeBlanc, and I think Douglas still got some years, and Jones have some years left on their contracts. I mean, you're kind of up in the air about what is the status of Craig James, Jalen Mills, and Ronald Darby. Are they going to be back next season? It's a difficult situation to weed out here because we're talking about young players. We're also talking about young players that don't necessarily have a long time left on these contracts. Um, safety position, we have a lot of stability there, but we also have a lot of age there. Jenkins, McLeod, and Sendejo are all. I'm not well. Jenkins and Sendejo are over 30 years old. Jenkins is 31, Sendejo's 32, and even Rodney McLeod himself is 29. Now you do got a young guy back there, and Rudy Ford is a pretty good special teams contributor who's 25. So, I mean, we do got some things we've got to sort out. I mean, there's a lot of decisions have to be made that there's some emotional attachment to some of these players. I mean, Malcolm Jenkins has meant a lot to this team. I mean, I've even done film studies where I showed you how impactful Malcolm Jenkins is to this defense. But he's also 31 years old. These are big decisions coming up. Go to the linebacking core, and you have a lot of youth in the linebacking core, minus Nigel Bradham. He's coming up on what we're going to do about him. He's 30 years old. I mean, behind him, you got some young guys in Camus Grugier-Hill, Nate Gary, but those guys, I mean, Camus Grugier-Hill has a little more than just coverage abilities, but these are more coverage type linebackers than they are downhill defenders. Then you got a guy like Duke Riley, who's like, what, 6'1", 220? Also, he's more of a coverage guy and a special teams guy than he is a downhill football player. He's more of an athlete. The only guys you really have that are prototypical linebacker, you know, builds and abilities are Bradham, Edwards, and Singleton. We know that Bradham he's a good traditional linebacker, but I mean, let's be honest, he's played out of place in Philadelphia for a long time and has done a good job at being out of positioning for what he is. He's held up for a long, long time. But the injuries are catching up to this 30-year-old. TJ Edwards, I've seen some signs this year. TJ Edwards looks like this could be an impactful piece, and we're gonna need that to be so. Alex Singleton hasn't had a chance to really get on the field, so I don't really know what to say about him. We go to defensive end, and we got some questions going there. I mean, we signed Brandon Graham to that extension. Brandon Graham is 31 years old, and he's definitely an impactful player, just like Malcolm Jenkins. There's some looming questions between Graham, players like Graham, players like Bradham, players like Malcolm Jenkins. Like, we have big decisions coming up on some of these aging defensive players. We got some youth here, but a lot of this is projection. I mean, we know Derek Barnett's going to be a good football player. Our defense is in good hands with Derek Barnett. But he's the only sure thing that we have. I mean, I've seen some development from Josh Sweat, but I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass right now and tell you that I feel comfortable Josh Sweat is the number 2 guy, number 2 pass rusher. I'm feeling more and more confident with him being that 3rd guy. But he's got to show me personally more before I start feeling comfortable with him as saying he's the number 2. Vinny Curry, he's a 31-year-old who's already fallen down the roster. I mean, I think Sweat's rising while Curry's falling a little bit. Now, I do think Curry's still going to have a role on this football team. I think he's going to definitely play inside quite a bit. Him and Graham, I think, are going to definitely come inside. And that's where you'll see more guys like, in terms of the outside pass rush, you'll see more of players like Barnett and Jannard Avery down the line, and Josh Sweat probably getting more reps. I really wish that we saw more from Deshaun Hall. I wish he got more of an opportunity. He hasn't really gotten that yet, but this is another young guy. I mean, when you really look at this roster, guys, from the defensive end perspective, you got Barnett, who's 23, Sweat, who's 22, Avery, who's 24, Hall, who's 24, Sharif Miller, who's 22. And I'm going to give you another guy that's on this roster that the coaching staff loved, Joe Osman. Joe Osman's only 24. I mean, it does get interesting because I think Brandon Graham might be the guy that I think probably has the best chance of sticking around another year or two, but I am concerned about what we do long term at this position. I'm not so sure the Eagles don't continuously keep trying to address this in the draft, to be quite honest. Defensive tackles, I think long term, I think we're, for like the next 2 to 3 years, I think we're in good shape there. But we do have some issues here. I mean, even Fletcher Cox is 28 this year. I mean, Malik Jackson's 29. I mean, these guys will be coming back, and now you're running into a 30-year-old Malik Jackson who's going to be coming off a pretty serious injury the year before. You're going to have a 29-year-old Fletcher Cox. And then we do at least have a young guy, I think, that's going to be coming back. I'm pretty confident the Eagles are going to extend the contract to this young man, which is Hassan Ridgeway. Hassan Ridgeway balled out this year when he had his opportunities. I hate that he got injured. And we got a couple of younger guys that we just signed off other teams' practice squads that they looked pretty good in limited action last week. I mean, I think the Eagles really like Anthony Rush. I think they want to see more of Albert Huggins. But I think those guys have outside shots of being kind of a 4th DT on this team. I mean, this defense, guys, as I'm looking at it, there are a lot of question marks. I think 3 big ones, like I said, are really what are we going to do about the contracts of guys like Brandon Graham, Nigel Bradham, Malcolm Jenkins, and even to some extent Rodney McLeod. I mean, these guys they're aging veterans. I mean, I think the Eagles have they have a tendency from time to time to let emotion take over rational sense here. And I don't know, man. I mean, can you imagine this team without Malcolm Jenkins? That's a hard sell for me. I'm a little more willing to let Nigel Bradham go just because we haven't really been that good at linebacker anyways. And TJ, I mean, we've survived it. TJ Edwards looks like he could be something in the next couple of years. I don't think like this year or next year he's going to be that guy that we all turn to, but I think he's got some potential there. I mean, I think Nathan Gary is a very good role player for this team. I mean, I've definitely warmed up to Nathan Gary. There was a time where I didn't want this kid on the team, but I'll be honest with you, he's definitely showed some coverage ability this year that he's got to definitely work on his run defense because it's atrocious at times, but his pass defense has greatly improved, which is kind of expected being a former safety. Kamu Grugier-Hill, we need to see health from this guy. He's very talented, but I don't know if Hill, Gary, and Edwards are going to be the answer, but I think the Eagles feel way more comfortable letting Bradham go and kind of rolling with those guys because they've already been rolling with them pretty much for the whole season anyways. I am a little concerned about what they do with Jenkins and Graham. I mean, that's the veteran issues. Then we have to get to the young guy issues. Like, if we don't address this and we can't find young athletic guys in free agency, what do you do about guys like Darby? What do you do about guys like Mills? I mean, clearly at this point, it should become aware to us that our three best cornerbacks are Darby, Maddox, and Mills. Past that, I'd probably go LeBlanc and Douglas. And I'd probably take Craig James at this point over Sidney Jones, as sad as that is. Like I said, I think Sidney Jones is a serviceable man-to-man, man coverage corner. This kid does not have he has no clue how to play in the zone defense. He cannot read what's going on. I mean, you already know my saying, when Sidney Jones is thinking, Sidney Jones is thinking. So I'm not comfortable with Sidney Jones on this football team anymore. I think it's time to call that one a loss. You guys tell me what you think, man. I see some major question marks in the secondary, guys, past this year. I think we could definitely do some things with Rasul Douglas. I think some of you guys have suggested moving him to safety. I think Sidney Jones is a much better read and react, defensive back than we originally thought he was. So I can see a move like that. He's a big physical guy that'll play the run. He reads things really well. I think that's why I think that's why Rasul Douglas does so well in like zone concepts where he's not trying to run and you know most of the places that Rasul's been burnt on this year was not Rasul's fault. That was the safeties being out of place. I'd honestly like to see Rasul get a shot at safety. I'm not opposed to that at all. I'd like to see Cre'Von LeBlanc come back, but I've heard rumors that he might not be back this year. But Cre'Von LeBlanc looked really good in action last year. I'm shocked, man. I mean, Craig James is still on this team. I would have thought the coaching staff would have let him go if they didn't like him. They clearly trust this kid a little bit because he's still on this football team as of today. But yeah, I mean, these are my thoughts, man. Is that we got some mysteries going on with a very young cornerback position past this year. We have an aging safety position that we have to get answers to. We have a linebacking core of a who's who, and to see, a linebacking core that could use a major infusion of talent. And then we got a defensive end group that's young, it's fast, it's athletic, it's talented, but outside of Derek Barnett, I'm not sure that these guys are starting caliber. I like Genard Avery. I like what I've seen on him from film. And I like Josh Sweat. I think Josh Sweat has showed a little bit this year. I like Deshaun Hall. I like Joe Osman, but I'm not sure any of those guys are starting caliber defensive ends. Fletcher Cox, like I said, he's a star in this league. He's got a few more years where I think we can expect some major productivity from him. I'm not worried. I mean, Malik Jackson scares me a little bit, being a 30-year-old defensive tackle come off a major injury next year, but Malik Jackson is a wrecking ball down there. I mean, Malik Jackson is someone you take a shot on even at 30 years old. So, I mean, next year I think the defensive tackles are stabilized, and I think there is some youth behind them. I think Hassan Ridgeway looks like a guy that could be a starter. He could be a starter down the road. And I liked what I saw with Anthony Rush. I don't know much about Albert Huggins yet. I know the coaching staff liked him. The Texans certainly liked him, so I guess we'll see. All right, y'all tell me your thoughts. What do you think about this question of the defense, guys? We have 27 members of the defense on the active roster. And this doesn't count guys like Cre'Von LeBlanc that's on IR. It doesn't count guys that are Joe Osman that's on the IR. It doesn't count Malik Jackson or Hassan Ridgeway who are on the IR. So, I mean, what do you guys think, man? What do you think about this logjam we have here? What do you think about this issue with the corners? Would you sign back Ronald Darby? Would you sign back Jalen Mills? What do you guys think about safety? Would you bring back or would you work out another deal with Malcolm Jenkins, another extension, even though he's 31? I mean, I like Malcolm, but you do have to wonder how many more years of football life does this safety have in him. I mean, he seems like a guy that takes care of himself that might make it till he's about 35, but that's still 2, 3 years away, guys. I mean, he's not. It's not like that's that far down the road. Nigel Bradham, would you bring him back? Guys, tell me your thoughts here. What would you do about this aging defensive roster we got here? All right, y'all. Peace. I'm out of here, man. You know what time it is. Like, comment, and subscribe. And oh, yeah, EAGLES. Let's go, Eagles, baby.